I mentioned, I think, on Facebook last night, and I started getting immediate responses to it because our next guest is, well, I just have to put it this way. I think the listening audience just is absolutely loves hearing from her when she joins us periodically on the air on this program. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. But of course, well, I'm going to call it 41, slight warm up right now, but we will get into the 70s today. It's just unfortunately going to be a little nastier this coming weekend. State Representative Priscilla Giddings has quite a resume. Not only is she serving in the State House in Boise, but she, of course, was also a combat pilot in the United States Air Force and still serves in the reserves as a pilot. Recently returned from some what might be called military maneuvers, uh, probably for the best way to put that, simplest way to put that, in South Korea, which is a pretty, well, they're not shooting at the moment. Could be any day, could be a pretty hot war. We're all aware of that. And of course, there's been a lot of discussion in the news about it in the last several months. First of all, Representative, welcome back to our program.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be here.
We were just having an off-air conversation, and I was sharing with the representative that I went away for a funeral of uh, one of my relatives killed in World War II, and I was thinking his crew, they were on a B-24, which was nowhere near as sophisticated as what you fly. When you're up in the air, you're flying something around that probably cost I don't know, a few $100 million to billions of dollars a copy.
That's very true, but it's definitely a similar situation as far as flying and all the emotions and stress that goes along with it. But what an honor for you to have been able to be there for that funeral. And I'm sure it really inspired you with that patriotism that so many Americans are full of, but that right now, I mean, the media and the national politics are just creating this divisiveness.
Yeah, it was when I drove through this small town coming in on my way to the funeral home, and I saw flags all along the street, and I learned that they had been put up a couple of days earlier when the riders first came in escorting the funeral, or the hearse rather, and then the school children had literally come out on the street and stood with their hands over their hearts. It was a very touching moment, and I have a niece who's 20, I think she's 26 now, uh, said that she'd never given the stories about his life much thought, but she said it was the public reaction that caught her completely off guard. But it gives you hope when you see something like this that maybe the country isn't completely going down the drain yet. That there are a lot of people out there who still care and still believe in doing the right thing. Uh, Speaking of which, before we get into some of the discussion about piloting in South Korea, the last time you were here, there was a little bit of a, I think the word they use in the media is kerfluffle or something like that, or kerfuffle. I can't pronounce it exactly. That had come up, and the spokesman review was having some fun at your expense. And I decided to do a quick Google search yesterday after, of course, I've been home a couple of days, and there doesn't seem to be anything there in the last few days. Is this one of those situations where it seems to have just gone away?
Unfortunately, Bill, no. The whole situation was really quite unfortunate, and it really surprised me. It was an out-of-the-blue attack, questioning my character and whether or not I was paying taxes, and they literally asked me to step down from my position in the legislature. And that really took me off guard as a freshman legislator who, I mean, I follow all the laws. I really didn't expect that. And so the initial attack was all false, and thankfully there were some other reports that followed up saying that it was false. But the problem is that the media and the Speaker of the House chose to stand by the story, and that's where it rests right now. In that there's kind of there's the potential kind of threat out there that they want to maybe look at this and when the new legislative session starts, maybe have an ethics panel and maybe try to kick me out for this very just untruth, fake news. And so this just has red flags all over it, Bill. And it may not be in the news right now, but they are trying to sit on it and just trying to stir up more divisiveness, and it's Republican leadership that is doing this. And there was such an opportunity for the Republican leadership to take the lead on this situation and to really show Idahoans that we support, the laws and that we want to follow the laws. And if there's any misunderstanding, let's clarify the laws so that the people can have confidence in our government. But right now, they have Republicans fighting, putting up fake news stories against other Republicans on something as simple as taxes. And all Republicans agree that we need fair taxes, and we shouldn't tax people more than what the law requires. And that's what they've asked me to pay more taxes than what the law requires. And that's just absurd. And so it gets me into more of the concerns that we have about Idaho tax code and laws. And so I have I've got a bill drafted that I'm going to present that's going to hopefully dive into some of these tax issues and alleviate some of this miscommunication and infighting inside the Republican Party.
I did read, even though the Spokesman Review did one of those usual "we stand by our story" type of responses when Wayne Hoffman from the Idaho Freedom Foundation challenged what they were doing. But buried in that story was an admission that said that your issues are between you and the tax assessor. In other words, there's nothing criminal going on here, and they couldn't really say there was anything unethical. So the newspaper has at least given a tacit admission that, someone's trying to embarrass you, and it is embarrassing, but it's nothing that's going to rise to the level of anything. As I think I pointed out on the air, you're not Duke Cunningham.
No, definitely not. And then the thing is, before I built a house and I moved and everything, I called both counties' assessors, and I asked them specifically what I needed to do to make sure I did it right. And I did that. And they've never contacted me. Still to this day, I've never received any official communication that I have done anything that is contrary to the law and what they said. So really, this is just it's almost like cyberbullying. They're trying to push me in a direction, asking me to step down through online media sources, and it's just really unfortunate. And I hope that Idahoans can see through it.
Well, they can't defeat you in a primary, and I know your own party wants to get rid of people they think are thorns in the side of the establishment. They can't defeat you in a primary. They obviously can't find a Democrat to defeat you, so they have to look, I would imagine, and they feel if they could get you out of the way, they might send a chilling message to the growing, what has been a really growing caucus from 2 to 7, now to about 30 members of the 105 folks serving in the Idaho legislature.
Absolutely, and I hope that this coming election year that those numbers just keep growing, because once we reach that tipping point, I think we really can get Idaho back to the fundamentals of really what a true Republican stands for and what I really think that Idahoans want.
In other words, these guys in the establishment who sometimes I think they serve Simplot or Micron Technologies before they serve the public. And by the way, Micron just announced yesterday it has record profits, but gee willikers, Asian labor is a lot cheaper, so we're going to let people go from working here for us in Idaho, lay people off, fire them. That maybe sometimes the Republican establishment does not have the best interests in mind of the people they serve.
Not just maybe, Bill. It's absolutely, and from an insider's perspective, I can confirm that 100%.
I was sitting here thinking about this situation the last few days, and here you've come back from, this, you get gobsmacked with this as soon as you come back from, being involved in war exercises in South Korea. Situation there could go hot any day. I can't believe that anyone in their right mind, first of all, we saw Roy Moore win a runoff election, a runoff primary in Alabama. That should send a message to Republican establishment all over the country. But that anyone in their right mind would challenge a combat veteran and someone who just returned from a situation where you could have been shot down. And in fact, the North Korean government's making those threats now. Do you think that these people are wholly out of touch?
So out of touch, Bill, and it really actually was a bit troubling for me that we had about 6 Idahoans go over and serve to help augment what's going on in South Korea, and the mainstream media didn't cover it at all. And I even sent out information, and only the conservative networks, like yours and the Gem State Patriot and Readout News, conservative networks, were the only ones that ran this. I mean, really quite a patriotic story and a reason to be proud of Idahoans that went over and helped and supported. So I just really disappointed in on some of the media and their choice not to cover that and talk about it. But the positive side is I did volunteer to go over there. What happened? Our previous commander-in-chief just really cut all of our forces enormously, and our new commander-in-chief wanted to make sure that we had the manpower in Korea if anything bad were to happen, especially during this large exercise that I volunteered to go over there to support. So they needed and they asked for reserves personnel to go over and augmentee what was going on. And what I volunteered for was it's the largest exercise, and it's a simulated supported exercise. So just to kind of correct you, I wasn't actually flying in South Korea, but we were virtually flying, providing what would happen if something bad happened. And so we had about 2,400 augmentees that went over there, and I was sleeping on a cot in a tent, right underneath some Patriot missile defense systems, and it's been, it was monsoon season over there and raining, and our tents were flooding, and was working nights and working side by side with South Korean fighter pilots, and just learning about the whole situation, and it was just an incredible opportunity to see how resilient the South Koreans are, and then how appreciative they are of us being there. It was overwhelming how much they really respected us and wanted to work with us, and they really do want peace, and they want that unity with North Korea, and it's just a really tragic state of affairs that's going on over there right now.
Got about a minute before the break, and if you can, I hope you can stick around for a few minutes up until maybe 9:30. But I would imagine that after what you've gone through in your service with the Air Force, and as well as in the reserves, that a lot of the challenges you face in Boise are probably small or minor in comparison. I'm not denigrating what happens when you're legislating, but it seems to me that the challenges of actually defending the United States are on a whole different level. We've got to take a short break. You can stick around for a few more minutes?
Definitely.
Wanted to mention Priscilla Giddings is our guest this half hour on the program, state representative joining us from Whitebird. And just to point out, too, as well as I mentioned earlier, her Republican establishment colleagues would like her to resign because her constituents love her, and there's simply no way she's going to lose in a primary or a general election. And the only way that they can get rid of those people who are thorns in their side so they can continue serving the big donor class is to remove the people and somehow believe that no one will notice what they're up to. We've got more coming up with the representative in just a couple of minutes. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And right now, we're at 40. Our guest during this half hour of the program is State Representative Priscilla Giddings, and she's joining us this morning, discussing a little state politics as well as a little national defense. Because, of course, in her other role outside the legislature, she is still in the reserves and has served on active duty prior to that in the Air Force and combat pilot. At 9:22 and it's 42. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Representative Giddings, I was sitting here and I was thinking during the break about the fact that these are challenges that you have to face, and I'm sure you've had people throw a lot worse at you in life at some point. But still, it's got to be annoying to get the impression that people are just trying to get rid of you because, I'll give you a good example. I hear some of these people, these veteran legislators tell me they'll say, oh, well, these people aren't building relationships. You need to build relationships. In other words, you got to go along and get along, I think is the way I interpret that. I've never voted for someone who came to me and said, by gosh, I'll build relationships. People are looking for someone to kick the legs off from under the table, is my impression. And this whole build relationships thing just seems to me like they're going there and just mailing it in so they can walk away with a nice pension.
You're so right, Bill. In fact, it was just yesterday that I had someone who was a pretty, avid proponent of the Republican Party and the establishment say that I just need to learn how to find common ground and to come together and to ask what I can do to cave and so that I can get along. And I think our country is past that, and our state is past that. We can't keep compromising. It's the people are tired of compromising everything that they know about freedom and the greatness of Idaho. I mean, we don't have anything else to compromise with. We're $5.1 billion in debt as a state. What can you compromise with? I don't think Idahoans like being victims to somebody, to a puppet master. But it is interesting the politics at the world level and here at the local level, just how similar things are. And I wanted Bill to share a couple stories of things I experienced in Korea.
Sure.
That can maybe you can look at the political analogies. The first one, I did have a couple days off on the weekends. I was able to travel around the countryside in South Korea. And one of the opportunities I had was to go up to the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, between North and South Korea, which is about 35 miles away from their capital city of Seoul. And Seoul itself has about 10 million people right in the city and 25 million people in the entire, on all the suburbs. And they're just 35 miles away from North Korea. Well, at the DMZ, the South Koreans have found 4 tunnels that is ever since back in the when I think the early, probably 60s, 70s, the North Koreans started building tunnels so that they could get under the DMZ and try to infiltrate South Korea. And I got to go down inside one of these tunnels, and it was just solid granite and just remarkable at what the North Koreans had built trying to get down to the south. And so there's 4 that the South knows about. And they had a North Korean defector tell them that they knew of 20 tunnels. So that means that there are 16 tunnels still along that border somewhere, potentially, where the North Koreans have this ability to potentially get down into South Korea. And each tunnel is built so that the North Koreans can get about 30,000 troops through it in about 1 hour. And so that really puts a new fear, I think, in a lot of people's minds of where these tunnels could be and what's going on. So the South Koreans are constantly on guard and on watch. They have CCTV everywhere, all along the river, just north of the town of Seoul. They have huge chain link fences and guard towers and video cameras because they don't want any North Koreans getting down into their country through the rivers. Just a fascinating state of how they're living, just constantly on the edge. And then it was interesting that on the border, when you actually look from South Korea over to North Korea, there you can see some kind of, it looks like a cities in the distance, but it's actually a facade of cities. It's not a real city. So North Korea has made this political move of trying to make them look so powerful and so, good. They want to make themselves look good so that maybe they can get some South Koreans to feel sorry for them and go to the north. And so when you look at these cities and you see it looks like a big city, but I only saw 2 people. And then they even had papier-mâché animals to look like they were really developing the land. And it's fascinating, just that aspect that it's all fake. And if you look at satellite pictures from like the International Space Station, it flew over Idaho last night actually, and it'll be in the sky tonight again. When you see a night picture of North and South Korea, the north is just totally blacked out. There's very little lights, and the south is just booming and thriving with freedom. But yet the north is playing this political game of trying to make it look like they have something that they don't. And that really struck me when we were, if you want to bring that kind of concept home to local politics, of how the establishment here in Idaho, they're trying to look like they have something that they don't, and the people, they want the truth.
I was going to say, it's reversed here, though. Isn't there more liberty in northern Idaho?
You're exactly right.
I had a conversation with a friend from Canyon County one day, and he was telling me that he went to one of his Republican committee meetings, and the chairman, who was a lawyer, said to him, he said, the problem with all of you folks in this liberty movement is you think we ought to always adhere to the Constitution. And my friend said, well, when you're in the courtroom, don't you do that too? And you hear this stuff, and it's almost as if they're telling you, well, yeah, we'll give it lip service, but we don't really mean it.
Yeah, I believe in following the law, and this lawlessness and these attempts for leadership in the legislature to think that just whatever they say is the law, that's not a republic form of government. And that is what really scares me, Bill, and that's why I am just out there fighting as much as I can to stand up for what I really believe Idahoans really want, and that's to follow the law and to be told the truth. And it's just it's kind of unfortunate.
Well, I want to thank you for your time this morning and wish you good luck on this. My impression, as I've had my ear to social media, is you not only have a lot of support, your support may be growing. Maybe not necessarily among some fellow legislators, but I think that if they would open their ears a little bit, they'd probably hear a little bit more from constituents, and I would highly recommend that. But again, I'll look forward to talking to you again sometime soon.
Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend.
Well, and you don't need to call me sir. Thank you again, Representative Priscilla Giddings, joining us this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We've got a short break coming up. One more half hour of our program ahead. And again, four words, two words for the Republican establishment everywhere. Roy Moore, and two other words, Donald Trump. You got to start realizing the earth is moving under your feet.